The work of church planting is extremely difficult and challenging, and really only those who are called to it should be doing it. I'm Britton Taylor, and I have been in ministry for 15 years. I've served on staff of a mega church in Alabama as college minister. I've served as a church planter overseas in the Middle East as we sought to make disciples and establish churches that were multiplying among unreached people groups. And most recently served as a pastor of a congregation in North Carolina. I'm married to Brooke Taylor. We have 5 boys, Braden, Brody, Brooks, Breck, and Braxton. And we are here in Washington, D.C. To plant churches.
The process of assessment is all about us helping somebody discern with confidence that they are called to plant a church. A couple weeks ago, I was talking to one of our church planters here in Washington who, before he became a Christian, had spent 4.5 years in prison. And we were talking about church planting and how challenging and difficult it is. And he said this phrase that will forever stick in my head. He said, "This is the hardest thing I've ever done," talking about church planting. And I said, "Man, you've been in prison." And he said, "This is way harder than prison." And it just reminded me that the work that we're doing to establish churches in these secular cities and secular places is work that is really, really difficult and dangerous. And so it's essential that we make sure, 100% sure, before we step into the field of church planting, that the person that we're sending to plant is called by God for that work, because their calling is the only thing that will sustain them through the difficulty of church planting and ministry. So we have this time set aside, this assessment a couple times a year, where we can look really intently at this one issue.
So going into assessment, there's some nerves for sure, not exactly sure what to expect, but just confident in the process, thankful to be a part of a network that has done this before, time and time again, so I gladly give myself to this process. So church planting assessment is a process by which a team of individuals with wisdom and experience look into a potential church planter's life to see if the calling, the competency, and the character is consistent with someone who would be able to successfully plant a church. So I'm thankful to be a part of a network that takes assessment seriously.
What we're striving to do as family dynamic assessors is really evaluate and assess the candidates in their relationship with their spouses, their children.
My name is Brandy Cousins. I'm assessing the emotional and spiritual health of the candidates and their wives.
My name's Eric, and I am here to assess church planters on their church planting plan, on their evangelism plan, and discipleship.
Where individuals who've done this before looks into my life to see, does my life exemplify the character of Christ, not just publicly but also privately. I want others to look in my life and say, this brother has biblical qualifications for a leader in the church.
So oftentimes in ministry, especially in church planting, there can be a lot of stress, a lot of ups and downs, mountains, valleys, and we just want to make sure that our candidates are prioritizing their family. So as an assessor, that's what we're looking at.
But not just character, also competency. Somebody looking in and a team of wise individuals looking into my life to see, do I have the skill set, the giftings, the intangibles that's required in order to see a new church planted.
We're going to take some time to ask you some questions about preaching in general, about what we heard, and just to interact a little bit with your message.
And what I would like for us to consider this evening is this: what would our lives look like if they were driven by the power of God? And then finally, just the calling. Does my life display the reality that God has called me to such an important task of planting a new church? And so the plan is for us to plant a church, but it doesn't stop there. We want to plant a church that continues to plant more churches. So what I'm asking for you to do is to prayerfully consider partnering with us in this movement that God is doing. Only God's power in you is able to accomplish God's purpose through you.
O Spirit of God, now shape our hearts. O Spirit of God, now guide our hands. O Spirit of God, now use us to build your kingdom. And the people said, Amen. All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. It has been a joy and an honor to get to know you, to pray with you. Thank you so very much for being open to this process and submitting to it. We are now inviting you, asking you to leave. Okay? The assessors have a lot of work to get done, so if you guys will pack up and make your ways out, we would really appreciate it.
After 2 exhausting days of interviews, it's finally time for the candidates to go home, and when they go home, the real work begins. The assessors get together in what we call an after party, and they walk through each candidate, prayerfully considering if they believe God's called them to start a new church.
So I'm thankful to be a part of a network that takes assessment seriously.